Hello, and welcome to Your Vote Counts, a public service program for the Special District's May 18th election that is being produced by Capital Community Media via remote technology in collaboration with the community groups of American Association of University Women, the League of Women Voters Marion and Polk Counties, and Salem City Club. For the Salem Keizer School Board election, all candidates were invited, and they all accepted that invitation. Candidates were asked to prepare a 2-minute opening statement telling about themselves and their qualifications for the elected position. I'm Cindy Condon from the Salem City Club, and I'd like to introduce Jesse Lippold Peone III, running for the school board from Zone 5, who will now begin with his opening statement. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Jesse Lippold Peone III. I ran for the Salem Keizer School Board in 2017 to fight for our most vulnerable kids. You elected me into office, and I've spent the past 4 years on the Salem Keizer School Board working hard to represent our most vulnerable kids and make sure we're giving them a high-quality education. I'm running in 2021 to serve my second and final term for the same reason. I know what it's like to be in foster care, homeless, and to wake up every day with no hope for your future. I know what it's like to be Native American, to have my family torn apart, and to always be told that I'm not Native enough simply because I don't carry a tomahawk around with me. I know what it's like to overcome these obstacles and become successful. And I made a promise to myself as a teenager when I was sleeping in a freezing elevator that I would try my best and work my hardest I can to be successful. So that way I can come back and save every kid who went through things that I did, who went through those things like me. Every kid who's fallen through the cracks and been left behind. And I intend to make good on that promise. In the last 4 years, I've grown exponentially. I've passed policies that put kids first, been very successful in moving the ball forward for kids and working across the aisle to do so. I understand the political world a lot better now than I did when I was elected 4 years ago. I stripped myself of political party and passed biases, so that way I can truly focus on improving education in a nonpartisan way. I'm extending this commitment by being the only candidate in my race that's not accepting any endorsements from partisan interest groups, including the groups that are nonpartisan but act in a very partisan way, which is most of them. If reelected, I will be the most experienced board member besides just one. I understand our systems, I've built the relationships, and have a proven record that I am able to work across the aisle and help kids. I want to use my experience in leadership to ensure our board actually creates board goals like we promised the community a year ago, and hold the board and superintendent accountable so we can put kids first.
Jesse, thank you for that information. And now on to questions. But before we get started, the following questions were developed by the sponsoring groups, and the candidates did not receive them ahead of time. There are 7 questions, and each candidate has 9 minutes to answer them. Not all questions need to be answered, but all the candidates will be given the same questions and the same 9 minutes total time, which includes the time it takes to ask or repeat a question. The candidates' responses to the individual questions will not be timed, only the total time. Now, let's give candidate Jesse Lippold Peone an opportunity to address some questions and topics of concern to our community. So Jesse, to start us off, if elected, in what areas of school board responsibilities are you particularly interested?
Of course, we represent all kids and we have to help everybody, right? But if we're looking at the world through an equity lens, which is what we try to do in education, of course, there are some kids who need a little bit more help than others, right? Kids who don't have parents to go advocate for them when they get bad grades, or kids who are going through foster care or homelessness, things like that. And those are a lot of things that I experienced when I was younger. It's one of the big reasons I ran for the school board to begin with. And in the past 4 years, I think some of the biggest things that we can do is board governance. We need a school board that truly leads. And a part of that is being a highly functioning board. The past year, it's been rather dysfunctional, but I've tried to do the best I can with what I have and move forward policies that put kids first. And that's really what I'm focused on. And then 2 is making sure that I'm looking at our systems. So I believe that we need to have systems that meet the needs of kids, not trying to make kids fit the system. right? And what that means is looking at what's working and what's not working. And those are things that I've been doing the past 4 years, and I'm going to continue to do. For example, I realized that, it's important to have student voice in the boardroom. So what did I do? I passed a policy and got it worked across the aisle with our conservative board members and our more progressive board members, and passed a policy that got student voice systemically in the boardroom. And when we talk about school discipline, I've been advocating for this for a couple of years now, when it became very apparent that our African-American population here in town, our parents, they wanted to take a look at school discipline and those systems. And so now we're doing that, and we're looking at, okay, how can we better serve the needs of kids instead of trying to get them to fit what we in our heads want them to be, and so that's one of the biggest things I think we're going to be needing to do moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that. So moving on to something that's been in the news. If the district moves to elect school board members by zone rather than at large, what effect or effects do you think it will have to elect board members by zone rather than as we currently do at large?
Sure. Well, as you may know, I wrote that policy and, I brought it forward to the board. I think it's going to do a couple of things. And we're seeing actually the repercussions of the opposite effect right now, since we didn't pass it. Right now, we have a couple big special interest groups in town that run our elections. And some of them have nothing to do with education. Like, for example, and just to name a few couple, like Right to Life or Planned Parenthood or like a nurses union or a plumbers union, like some of these don't have anything to do with education. Like, we just don't deal with that as a school board. As a society, we do. As a school board in education, that's not really what we deal with. And so I think that the way it's set up right now at large, you either have to A, be independently wealthy, or B, you have to bend the knee to these special interest groups or political parties, right, in order to raise enough money to run for office. And so the way I'm approaching my campaign right now is I told them all back in January and before that, I told them I'm not going to accept their endorsements because I want to run my campaign the same way that I govern, which is kids first. I don't want to have to worry about someone calling me a couple months to a year down the line and saying, hey, why aren't you voting in line with the other candidates? Which none of them would admit to doing that. But, I just don't want to have to deal with that. And I want to be able to do my work and put kids first. And that's what I'm really focused on. So by doing it by zone instead of at large, it'll do a couple really important things. One is it'll break down the income barriers. So for example, in Keizer 2 years ago, Chuck Lee, great guy, right? But he raised $63,000 for his school board race. That's crazy. And that's for a volunteer unpaid position to represent kids. And he ran against Danielle Bethel, right? Another leader in our community who raised, I don't remember her amount exactly, so I don't want to say it. But, those are two very well-known names in town. Both raised a lot of money. They have a lot of support. If you're a single mom who has kids who go to McNary High School, and you live in Keizer, how do you compete against that? It's almost impossible. And so the reason I brought this forward was because I wanted to break down some of those barriers to make it so that way, instead of having a shallow pool across 200,000 people, which is what we do right now, you can dig a really deep well in your community. Instead of me having to knock on doors in South Salem or West Salem or Keizer, I can focus on making sure my community locally, my neighbors all know what's going on. Because technically right now, I don't have to campaign at all in my zone and I could still win. Right. I myself don't. I won my zone by 65% last time. And I plan to do so again. But at the same time, the focus I think is off. And so the biggest thing is you represent your community better. The second thing is it'll break down income barriers for people to run for office. And the third, and this is one that's very important, is racial barriers, right? Because if you look at the east side of town, like where I live, Four Corners, east side of Salem, there's just by population, there's more people of color in this part of town. So if they're elected by West Salem and South Salem, but they lose their zone, right? Even if it's not racism, it sure looks like it, right? And so even to have the possibility there, I think is a big issue. And that's something that we need to talk about as a community. And
okay.
and we will be in for the next couple of years.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We'll move on to get to more questions. In several places in the district policy for the school board, it states that there are to be regular opportunities for public feedback. How is this ensured, and what would you do differently, if anything, to make it more standard?
Yeah, I mean, COVID has made this a little bit harder, so we've really had to change things. And so I understand in the past year, it's been a little bit tougher to get more community impact input. But what we've done a couple times, and we've really changed the way we do this, because when I first got on the board, that was a pretty big issue, was disparities between what the district might think is important versus, community, and some community members not feeling heard. But what we started doing was, instead of making them come to us at the board meeting, where we can't respond to you because it's in the rules that we can't, and you have 3 minutes and you can't say anything more or anything less, right? Then what we started doing was we would come to the community. So we would go to like their local school or something, and we would set specific meetings together in different parts of town to make sure that people are getting heard. And so what I would do is I would try to expand that, so that way we're getting more input and trying to meet parents and students where they're at, instead of making you come to us.
Okay, thank you. And moving on, what do you think about the decision to skip standardized testing this year?
Well, I voted in favor of skipping it this year. Just so you know, me personally, I'm not a huge fan of some of the standardized tests. I mean, I graduated in 2015, and so I grew up in this school system, and I know I've always felt like sometimes the education system as a student feels like you're around a peg and they're trying to cram you into a square hole. And I don't know. So I have my own opinions about the SBAC and the standardized tests. But this year specifically, just because kids haven't been in person in school and we only have a couple weeks left, I think that it's really important that we focused on making sure kids are learning and getting educated, instead of having to spend half their time that they're in class this year stressing out about a test that isn't going to give us a whole lot of feedback. But we are, just so you know, the district is doing a lot of tracking. They are tracking a lot of the same data. Like, they're making sure, hey, is this kid falling behind on math? Is this kid falling behind on reading? So we're just doing it locally, not statewide.
Okay, so one last question. What steps would you take to address the disparities in academic performance before the pandemic and now as we transition to in-school instruction?
Well, number one, go ahead. Well, number one is, getting kids back in school. I mean, that's really important to do, and make sure that we do it safely, right? And so we're starting to do that now. We're proving to the community that we can. And then the second is taking a look at, hey, who needs the help the most, and how can we help these students and meet them where they're at to make sure that we can get them to graduate.
Okay, so that's the end of our questions today. And now, Jesse, it's time for your closing remarks, and feel free to include contact information.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I mean, I really appreciate it. I just want to make it very clear to the community that my entire campaign and the way that I've been working and operating last 4 years is my focus is kids first. It's simple. I often tell people in the school board, it's we're either focused on kids or it's ego and politics. And I want nothing to do with those two. And so I'm focused on kids. I have a proven success record. I've been able to, with a very conservative school board and then like a more moderate school board. In both scenarios, I've been able to pass policies that move the ball forward for kids while still standing up for our most vulnerable kids. Like, I'm the only board member to ever stick up for our LGBTQ students in the boardroom when someone came in and was trying to get us to do things. And then, and I build a relationship with kids. Like, I'm in our schools. I spend a lot of my time volunteering. And when the pandemic hit, like, I would get like messages or like from some of the youth group kids that I used to lead, and talking to me and just being willing and open to share things with me. And I think my relationship-based approach is going to help us bridge the gap between our community and our school board and help us rebuild that trust with our community. My plan is to focus on board governance right off the gate, because the second we need board leadership that knows what they're doing, and we need to set clear and concise goals and stick with that. So that way the district knows what they need to do and we know what we need to do. Second is focusing on what works and what doesn't work with our systems to ensure that we're having our systems fit the needs of kids, not making kids fit the needs of our system. And then third, of course, is being active and engaged, which is what I've proven to do time and time again in the last 4 years. So if you guys were willing to help out, I would love some help. I need all the help I can get because I'm not endorsed by these big PACs. So my website is skschoolboard.com, or you can reach out to me at jesseputs.kids-first@gmail.com, or even my cell 971-915-3575. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Jesse Lippold Peone, for our interview today and sharing your thoughts. Thanks to Capital Community Media for the extensive effort made to make this program happen. And thanks to you, the public, for watching in order to become an informed voter. Remember to vote by May 18th because your vote counts.